Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and today I'm looking at an important book, one I found fascinating historically. This is the book called Harry Roberts and Foxtrot 1-1, The Shepherd's Bush Massacre, written by Geoffrey Barton with a foreword from Mike Waldren, and it comes to us from WATERSIDE Press, putting justice into words. Now, I've given for the title of the review a sad tale which bears retelling for a new generation. And I'm going to leave it at that because that actually is what this book is about. It's a paperback. There are the photographs of the people involved. That's the front cover. There's the side, and then there's the back. The book runs to just over 200 pages. The index at the back is by page numbering. And you can see there's a conclusion right at the back. The conclusion is well worth reading. And I'm not going to spoil this book because I think you should read it. There is the front page. There's the actual map of where the shootings took place. That's the blurb about the book, and then there's the contents section itself. Runs into quite a number of chapters, 13 chapters. Talks about the release of Harry Roberts at the end of the book and what happened to the other people. There's some illustrations, and then there's detail about the author and about Mike Waldren. And there are some acknowledgements and again photographs of the people concerned. There's a foreword as well, which sets out what happened and that's Mike Waldren there. And then there's an introduction. The introduction is from and I'm not going to talk about what it says in the introduction. You can read it yourself. It talks about what happened, the murders and the aftermath. And that actually at the back shows the problem. This was a very well-known matter at the time. I certainly remember it well. And this is what I say. That day will be remembered as if it was yesterday for many people, as including me, because I remember it very well. Possibly 100 years from now, those reading this book will find the history of that time rather as we consider and judge the Great War by our current attitudes and prevailing views. So with this important piece of history, and that's what it is, from 1966, will come views from new generations of criminologists and those fresh to the facts of this most infamous drama. That is what we say by way of an introduction to readers new to the era. It was August 1966, 2 weeks after England won the World Cup. There was a lot of euphoria around actually in London. I remember I was around at the time. I remember that period in history quite well. And 4 miles from Wembley Stadium, a man called Harry Roberts and his associates gunned down 3 unarmed police detectives in front of dozens of primary school children. The author, Geoffrey Barton, says the nation was outraged and struggled to understand what had happened. Roberts had served in the special forces during the conflict in Malaya and claimed he was assigned to kill selected targets. That was one of the arguments put forward. Roberts, returned to the United Kingdom, keen to continue such work in civilian life. But he was rejected by 2 gangs that dominated London's underworld at that time. That's the 60s, the Crays and the Richardsons. Interestingly prophetic, they considered Roberts to be too violent. Now, after the Shepherd's Bush Massacre, as it's called in this book, it was just called the shootings at the time, Roberts' accomplices, John Whitney and John Duddy, were quickly arrested. But Roberts went to ground, and again there was a huge amount of publicity about this at the time. He used his survival and camouflage skills that he'd learned in the army, keeping the avid newspaper readers guessing as to what might happen next. And I can remember the build-up over the time to the time that he was finally arrested. It's an important book from WATERSIDE Press. I'm not going to spoil it by telling you too much detail because you want to read the book yourself. Read about the man, read about what had happened to all of the people concerned, and you get some idea of that particular time in history. Harry Roberts and Foxtrot 1-1 as a book covers meticulously every detail of the investigation and manhunt that followed, from arrest, trial and imprisonment of Roberts eventually, and to his controversial belief whatever one's views of penal policy. Because clearly there were different views about what should have happened to him. Let me conclude by saying I found this book very interesting because I'd lived through that time, and obviously I remember being passionately opposed to capital punishment myself. I do remember the issues that were raised at that particular time, but the drama remains one of the most notorious crimes of the 20th century and is very well retold to new audiences. It's a case that led to the police firearms training arrangements which we find today, even as I'm delivering this review, they are reassessing with huge knife crime problems in London alone. They're reassessing that at the very time that I'm recording this, at the end of 2018. The author also looks at the tragic impact on the victims' families with informed comment from the former senior Met Police armed officer, which I do think is of some help. And the book, of course, was published some time ago now in 2018. I'd like to thank, I think it was 2018, beginning of 2018. I'd like to thank everybody concerned for producing it. Let's have one last look at it. There it is again. It's the front, the spine, and then the back. I found it a very interesting book, very thought-provoking. It reminded me of what had happened. And you get the investigation going all the way through there, and then you get the investigation there, then you get the actual information about Harry Roberts himself, and then right at the back you get imprisonment for life. He was there obviously in prison for a very long time, and then of course he was released, and the decision to release caused, as I say, a lot of additional comment. It depends on your point of view about penal policy. My own opinion, and it's been expressed in this and other reviews, is that penal policy is a complete and utter mess at the moment, and we've got to reassess what we do. In the meantime, I think this book, it's interesting legally for me, it's interesting from the police point of view, and I think it's got a very great interest for the general readership. So a big thank you to WATERSIDE for the courage in producing this work. I thought it was well worth doing because it's a subject which I'm sure a lot of people remember vividly from the past. Thank you to all concerned anyway. Bye-bye.